Terraria, one of my favorite games of all time. But what if the game was good? Today we're gonna find out if we could beat Terraria as Sonic. The Sonic Movements mod adds Sonic's abilities to Terraria, as well as new accessories. And this wonderful sprite here is from this texture pack. I also installed a couple of quality of life mods that add NPCs to cut down on grinding, and also added a couple of accessory slots since this mod has its own accessories. For this video, I'll mainly be attacking using Sonic's abilities, but I will allow summons. So, without further ado, let's find out if you can beat Terraria as Sonic. Spawning into my wonderful mass mode world, Green Hill, the first thing I do is cause chaos by spawning in Omochao. But he's actually useful here, as he gives me the sharp spines and running shoes. The sharp spines turn my jumps into spinballs that deal damage, and the running shoes make me really fast, with the speed increased by how many rings I have. He tells me that enemies will drop skill points and rings upon dying. Skill points, much like Sonic Frontiers, are currency for Omochao to purchase numerous upgrades for Sonic, and rings increase not only my speed, but my damage negation as well. But I lose some upon getting hit. So I start chopping down trees like a true Terrarian and start exploring the right side of the world. Eventually I reach the desert, and Lady Luck shines upon me because I find a pyramid. But I get mauled by a vulture, so there's my first death. Upon making my way back, I get the flying carpet, which the texture pack replaces with the Knuckles glide, which I thought was really cute. It's the thing I wanted the least, but it actually has really good synergy with this mod because I could float with my spinball active, dealing more damage. I also got a total of 15 gold, so I figure I should probably go home to put it in a chest. But upon resurfacing, I see that the ops are posted up on both sides. But eventually the ones on the left despawn, so I head home and prepare for another expedition. I head underground to find some good loot, and I immediately find a heart crystal to increase my max health. I also find an underground house which just has boots in it, which are useless because I already have Sonic's running shoes. I die a lot trying to explore more, and I realize some problems with dealing damage. Sometimes when I jump, Sonic does a regular jump, not a spin jump, leaving me vulnerable. Getting stuck in cobwebs is basically a death sentence since my copper short sword isn't good at clearing them. And if that wasn't bad enough, my glide spinball strat also falls short because enemies can just power through and beat me to death. So instead I go back to the surface and make my way to the right side ocean, passing the jungle and two large trees, giving me an idea for later. Upon returning, I try a different cave to find some better loot without dying as much. I found a mushroom biome, a band of regeneration inside of a chest, and more heart crystals. While running around, I also find a slime statue with a pressure plate that spawns slimes, and this gives me an idea. By repeatedly spawning slimes and killing them, I'm able to grind out rings and 1,500 skill points, using them to purchase the homing attack. The homing attack is awesome, and it becomes my primary damage dealer for basically the whole game. Going deeper, I find a minecart track that leads me to more chests. And one of these chests just so happens to contain a mace, which does more damage than my copper short sword. This is the perfect time to say the damage dealt by Sonic's abilities are equal to the damage of the weapon that I'm holding. Since the mace does 20 damage, my jump and my homing attack also do 20 damage. After mining some ore and heart crystals, I increase my max health and make a platinum pickaxe and tungsten armor. After upgrading, I decide to go to the left side of the world, finding the snow biome and the dungeon. Right before the ocean though, I find a trio of trees and decide to put my idea into action, making a massive treehouse. After finishing my house, I head to the underground snow biome where I find a pyramid of all things. Inside I find the Pharaoh's outfit, which I'll make use of later, and I also find the last heart crystal I need to get to 400 total health. I also picked up a gravity potion and enough platinum to make full platinum armor. I use the gravity potion immediately to start my search for Sky Islands, and I eventually find a few. From this haul I get a horseshoe to negate my fall damage, and a Star Fury, which does more damage than my mace. With my new upgrades, I figured it's about time I fight a boss, so I build a platform to fight on, and once nighttime comes, an evil presence watches me, and I prepare for war. The Eye of Cthulhu is actually pretty easy with my current loadout. The homing attack enables me to keep the damage up even when he starts dashing in phase 2. Upon defeating the Eye, I got one of my favorite accessories, the Shield of Cthulhu, which the texture pack changes to the Charge Dash Strike. Okay. The shield being one of my favorites because of its extremely useful dash skill. I also realized I had a ton of skill pieces from all the enemies I killed while mining, so I figured I might as well get another ability. I ultimately decided on the spin dash, mainly using it for mobility since the homing attack is still more applicable in a battle. Speaking of battle, we got another one we gotta prepare for. So I head over to the corruption and start breaking shadow orbs. I also buy the roll skill so I can use that following a dash, but I don't end up really using this combo. The roll's still useful though. We can't have nice things though because goblins decide to pull up to my new house, so I gotta fight them off before I take care of the worm. After a couple of deaths, I clear them all out. I also devise a strategy for the next boss, and it all revolves around one ability, the light speed attack. I would explain it, but I think showing it is better. Before we get to the next boss, there are 2 more abilities that I don't end up buying for one reason or another, and I'll go over them right now. The stomp skill is a skill that, well, stomps directly down, damaging enemies below me. I didn't pick up this skill because I thought it might get in the way if I'm trying to homing attack because they're on the same button. If I want to deal damage from above, I can just jump on them regularly. The other skill is the boost, which basically is just a dash that costs 5 rings. The only reason I didn't get this is because I thought the 5 rings would add up over time and drain my ring count. Now this was dumb in retrospect because my ring count eventually goes into the thousands, and I could have had another free accessory slot since I always have a dash when I play. With the platform set up and the last orb broken, the Eater of Worlds has awoken. But look at the light speed attack go to work! The Eater of Worlds stood absolutely no chance. The lightspeed attack was immediately a 10 out of 10 purchase, and I definitely won't regret this later on. The Eater dropped the Worm Scarf, which increases damage negation by 17%. We're in Master Mode here, so I'll take all the defense I can get. I do have to kill another worm to get enough materials to make the Shadow Armor, which has 1 less defense than the Platinum Armor. Well, so much for that. I found a Goblin Tinkerer tied up underground. Whatever you're into, buddy. And buy the Tinkerer's Workshop from him to combine accessories. After a few upgrades, I start heading to the jungle to meet our next victim. After some exploration, I find a beehive and set up an arena for an unbelievable battle. And it turns out grenades do more damage than my Star Fury, so I used that to fight Queen Bee. She was kind of annoying as she kept flying outside the arena, but eventually she fell just like the rest. After heading back to base, I buy the ring shield accessory to reduce my ring loss by 10%. I also pick up a few ring satchels to increase my maximum ring capacity from 400 to 2,000. With these upgrades, I do battle with Skeletron to unlock the dungeon. His hands are even easier than normal because of the lightspeed attack, and the homing attack puts the poor lad down without much fuss. Heading into the dungeon, the only thing I want is a weapon that does more damage than my grenades, and that's the Blue Moon, which I find very early on. After that, I think it's time to make some preparations for the strongest pre-hard mode boss. It's time to head into the underworld. The underworld is pretty annoying. Hellbats swooping in, lava slimes burning my bridge, imps sniping me, and demons just being a pain. I find an upgrade for my Blue Moon, the Sun Fury, rendering the Blue Moon the weapon I use for the shortest time. I get a couple of obsidian skin potions and then use them to hop into the lava to mine Hellstone for some more upgrades. I make Molten Armor for more defense and damage, and an Imp Staff for some Imp summons. I take a detour to the right side of the world and dig down until I find the Aether biome with the Shimmer Pool. The Shimmer Pool can actually transmute items thrown into them into other items. For example, the Pharaoh's Mask that we got earlier can be transmuted into a sandstorm in a bottle. And by combining it, a cloud, and blizzard in a bottle with 3 balloons, we can get the Bundle of Balloons, a super accessory that gives us a quadruple jump. I also hit up Omochao again to buy a bunch of ring capsules, which just give you 50 rings when used. Before I go back down to the underworld, a slime rain starts, and I realize I haven't fought King Slime yet. This guy's actually the easiest boss in the game, so yeah, we squash him. With all the preparations made, it's time to do battle. Sacrificing the guide, the Wall of Flesh is summoned, and he obliterates me. I fight him again for like another hour in now deleted footage, but I just can't get the job done. The problem ultimately lies with my beloved light speed attack. The Wall of Flesh spawns these little gremlins called the Hungry, dealing damage and respawning over time, but that's not the problem with them. The problem is the light speed attack. Much like Sonic Adventure 2, this mod suffers from same button syndrome as all of Sonic's abilities are on the same button. My primary attacking method is the homing attack, but since the Hungry are in the way, they not only guard the wall, but also act as multiple targets, initiating the light speed attack, which always ends with me taking a hit from a wall. A hit that does 225 damage. And on top of that, the lasers cancel out my spinball, meaning I can't defend myself and take more damage. That on top of the lack of AoE to deal with the Hungry, and I was getting beat so much you'd think I'm Finn Balor. Something had to give, and I bit the bullet and I broke the rules. I desperately wanted to avoid using weapons, but I was so fed up and I really didn't want to delay this video any longer. So I caved. picked up the Knight's Edge and I prepare to cover it in the wall of Flesh's blood. Put a band-aid on me using the sword. Sonic did use a sword in Sonic and the Black Knight. Granted, I haven't played it, but look, he uses it! Knight's Edge in hand, I do battle with the wall once more. And lose again. I do much better on my second attempt, but I still lose because I was too focused on doing damage and not dodging. Knight's Edge was actually really good for dealing with the Hungries, and with its large attack range, I can hit both the eye and mouth in one swing, dealing massive damage. I play the third battle much better, and the wall just ends up missing most of its shots. And in the end, I say screw the sword and hit him with a spin dash, killing the wall and ending pre-hard mode. Early hard mode is actually my favorite part of the game because of how much the world changes and all the upgrades you can get. In hard mode, almost all the enemies level up, new enemies pull up, and a new biome is introduced with even more bosses making themselves known. We gotta prepare for all of this now because our current gear isn't gonna cut it. The wall drops a demon heart that grants an extra accessory slot, and he also drops a sorcerer emblem, but I transmute into a warrior emblem, dealing 15% more melee damage. Omochao sells me better ring capsules, and I see the new Hallow biome has taken root in both the desert and the snow biome. Saving that for later, I head to the corruption and start breaking altars to spawn in new hard mode ore. My world gets blessed with cobalt, mithril, and adamantite ore, each one needing the previous tier of tools to mine. Taking some time, I mine all the necessary ore, and I end up with mithril armor and pickaxe. You must be wondering why I skipped out on the adamantite armor, as it is the best out of the 3 ores. But I can actually use the adamantite to make a different armor set, the frost armor. This armor is awesome. It has really good defense, and all my attacks inflict the frostbite debuff on enemies. But to get this, I need to kill ice golems, which only spawn in during a blizzard. But luckily for me, one is started, so I head over to the snow biome and find one pretty quickly. These guys fire beams that not only do a lot of damage, but also freeze you in place for a couple of seconds and slow you down for 2 whole minutes. So I just let my summons deal with them. With 3 golems eliminated, the frost armor is crafted, and it's pretty cool. You get it? One also drops an ice feather, which is perfect for my next upgrade. After killing enough wyverns with a light speed attack, I get enough souls of flight to craft the frost wings. I also kill a mimic for a cross necklace to increase my invincibility frames, which, needless to say, could have helped earlier. Alright, we have armor, we have wings, and we have accessories. Now all we need is a new weapon, and I know one that is perfect. Blood moons are a nocturnal event that increase enemy spawns and have some unique enemies and equipment. Much like everything else in hard mode, this event is buffed, adding new enemies that drop new weapons. One of these enemies being the blood eel, bearer of our next weapon. You have to fish for this one, and it's just a faster and more aggressive wyvern. I have to kill a lot of them because the weapon I want only has a 12.5% drop chance, but eventually it drops. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the Dribbler Crippler, my favorite melee weapon in the entire game. Luckily for us, it also has the highest base damage of any melee weapon at this point, meaning it's perfect for Sonic. Now that we're fully upgraded and prepared for hard mode, it's time for the mechanical bosses. I start with Skeletron Prime, who I deem the easiest out of the mechs. He's just a beefed up Skeletron, so I only don't attack when its head charges at me, and I'm able to tank most of its other hits. Both the homing and lightspeed attack with the Dribbler Crippler's damage obliterate Prime, taking out its limbs one by one. There is one scare mid-fight when I accidentally get stuck in his skull when he's spinning, and I almost die. But after a clutch heal and more homing attacks, Skeletron Prime goes down, and he drops a Chaos Emerald. In hard mode, 7 specific bosses each drop a Chaos Emerald. These emeralds aren't just for show, however, as each one has its own ability that goes on a cooldown after it's used. Now, usually I would go over them as we get them, but I don't end up using most of them, so I'll just go over them here. The yellow emerald slows down nearby enemies. The purple emerald acts as a spelunker potion, revealing orange chests nearby, but it only lasts for 5 seconds. The red emerald is essentially Bullet from Sonic Superstars, allowing an omnidirectional dash, but it doesn't do any damage. The green emerald spawns a spring underneath me that also resets flight time. The pink emerald turns me into a fairy that can fly in any direction, but I turn back if I'm hit. The blue emerald spawns a bunch of shark rons that destroy blocks. And finally, the white emerald rains down a bunch of spears that obliterate enemies. This is the only useful one. The next mech boss is the twins, who I deem the hardest of the 3. This was probably the closest twins battle I've ever had, as I literally ended it with 10 seconds left. Oh, did I say this battle? I meant the second battle because I got fried the first time. Both the twins are strong, but the green one is definitely more dangerous. Phase 1 is usually the easier phase, but since I'm constantly up close, I'm getting blasted. The cursed flames it shoots out not only deal damage, but also debuff me, halting any passive regen. I die very quickly without getting either of them to phase 2. In the second fight, I play a lot more aggressive at the start before the green eye starts firing faster, eventually getting green to phase 2, and after a lot of hit and run tactics installing, green goes down, leaving only phase 2 red. Red is not as dangerous as green, but the heavy laser fire can overwhelm very easily. I don't get overwhelmed though and beat red, therefore beating the twins, thus obtaining the purple emerald. I actually used the Souls of Sight that the twins dropped to make the Optic Staff, essentially turning my enemies into my friends. I obtained a Nimbus Rod earlier, and anybody who's played this game before knows that the next boss gets destroyed by this weapon. I will allow myself to use these types of weapons, being the Nimbus Rod, Clinger Staff, and Rainbow Gun, mainly because they're just weapons that work in the background and aren't actively used, kinda like summons. The last mech boss, the Destroyer, has awoken. The Lightspeed attack tries to redeem itself here, acting like it did during the Eater of Worlds fight, dealing massive damage. The Destroyer does release these annoying probes which keep shooting me out of my spin ball, which leads to a couple of hits I wouldn't have taken otherwise, but none of them are life-threatening. The Destroyer falls without much trouble, leaving behind the red emerald. Using the hallowed bars the mechs dropped, I crafted the hallowed armor, which I only wear for a single boss, that boss being the Queen Slime. She's technically supposed to be fought before the mechs, but she's not required and she doesn't have anything that I want. I do, however, fight her to see if she drops a Chaos Emerald, which unfortunately she doesn't. The fight is pretty easy, but her slime summons are annoying with all their projectiles. Nonetheless, she's defeated and I prepare to explore the Restless Jungle. Once there, I start mining Chlorophyte and Life Fruit for some gear and health upgrades. And after a long expedition, I have max health and turtle armor, made from chlorophyte and turtle shells from large turtles. With these upgrades, I head to the underground jungle and engage in a battle with Plantera. This boss is hit or miss for me. It's either super easy or super hard, and there's no in between. Her first phase is easy enough, although her seed bullets hit me constantly. But with all my rings and my new armor, I take it without a problem. And her second phase ends up being a breeze, as the recoil from my homing attack keeps me away from her so she can't deal any damage. Plantera falls without any trouble and the green emerald is mine. She was also generous enough to drop the Flower Pow, which is an upgrade from my beloved Drippler Crippler. Another drop is the Spore Sack, which is a really good accessory for grinding enemies. With Plantera dead, the dungeon receives new enemies, meaning new drops. I grind for a while until I get the Tabby and Black Belt, which when combined with some climbing claws, make the Master Ninja gear, which has a better dash than the shield, and the ability to dodge attacks. With that detour out of the way, I head back into the jungle to use the temple key that Plantera dropped to invade the jungle temple. After clearing out traps and reaching the final room, I set up a platform to do battle with the Golem, gatekeeper of the endgame. Now you know this and I know this. Golem is a joke. By far the easiest boss in hard mode and one of the easiest in the whole game. In his second phase, I barely have to fight him myself as my summons deal heavy damage to him and I finish him off with a spin dash. The developer themselves for this mod knows that he sucks, as even though Golem is a main boss in progression, he does not drop a Chaos Emerald. One good thing about Golem is that he drops beetle husks, allowing me to make beetle armor, the best melee armor for this point in the game. With Golem dead, we have some preparations to make for the endgame. I have 3 main bosses in mind, all dropping either a weapon or accessory that I need. The one I decide to go after first is the Dragon Bale. The Dragon Betsy, who drops the Flying Dragon Sword, which has the highest base damage of any melee weapon for this point in the game. Since this is going to be the weapon I beat the game with, I figured I might as well get it first to make everything else much easier. But Betsy isn't a boss you can just summon. She's the final boss of the Old One's Army, an invasion type event in Terraria. The Old One's Army is an event where you guard this crystal from enemies. There are these sentry summons that are used for the event that are basically required to complete it. But those sentries combined with my Nimbus Rod and Clinger Staff should make this a breeze. But unfortunately, the world had other plans. For some reason, my summons and my Clinger Staff were both bugged. After placing a summon, it would despawn only a few seconds after spawning in, and since I can't use the summons or one-shot the enemies, this event becomes impossible. Now, I don't know what to do. The Flower Pow's damage isn't good enough to carry me into the endgame, and I can't get the weapon that I need. I have to come up with a plan B if I want to complete this challenge, and after some research and a lot of off-screen grinding, I have my solution. The sniper rifle. No shadow in sight, baby. Sonic's the one with the strap now. Obtained from the skeleton snipers in the dungeon, it actually does a bit more damage than the flying dragon. Since it's a ranger weapon, I switch over to the Shroomite armor, sacrificing defense for more power. This is the accessory loadout after grinding, and I head to the Hallow for my next target, the Empress of Light. This is one of the more difficult bosses to fight as Sonic, mainly because I'm used to fighting her at a distance, but now I gotta get up close. The problem ultimately lies with her attacks. Her projectiles from her prismatic bolts spawn directly from her, and they do a lot of damage. Her most infuriating attack, however, is her everlasting rainbow. As you can tell by the name, the attack lingers, making dodging her other attacks even more difficult. The combination of these, unsurprisingly, leads to my death before even getting her to phase 2. But it's not impossible. After a couple more attempts, I learned the windows which I can attack her, upping my survivability. Outrunning her projectiles, going the opposite direction from her everlasting rainbow, and attacking after her dash are the strategies I employ for her first phase. Her second phase is actually more the same, she just adds a couple of attacks that I have no trouble dodging. My new summons, the Deadly Spears, also put in a lot of work in this fight, especially since I can't consistently attack her. My attacks eventually overwhelm her, being the most beautiful boss in the game and obtaining the pink emerald. The emerald wasn't the only thing I wanted, as the real reason I fought her was to obtain the Soaring Insignia, an amazing accessory that grants infinite flight time. Perfect timing too, as I also get the Empress's wings. With that done, I make my way to the ocean and prepare to take out my other target, Duke Fishron. Duke is probably the boss I struggle with the most, but he does have my favorite drops out of any other boss. The main issue with Duke is his dashes, allowing him to easily retaliate after my homing attack. His Sharkrons aren't an issue, but the Sharknadoes that spawn them end up getting in my way more often than not. My first attempt literally ends with me running face first into a Sharknado. I did make it to phase 2, so it's not all bad, I just played a little sloppy. After locking in, I head into my rematch with a strategy. Duke will charge at you 5 times in his first phase and 3 times in his second phase before using a different attack. The plan is to attack him after his dashes, and in between them if I see an opening. The plan for the Sharknadoes is to go to one side of the arena after he finishes dashing, and let him release the Nados there so it's out of the way. I don't follow the strat perfectly, but I follow it enough to push Duke into his third phase, where he miraculously realizes that he can teleport. Unfortunately for him though, Sonic has experience with teleporting enemies, so Duke is dealt with and the blue emerald is mine. I also get the Fishron wings, which are a little worse than my Empress wings, but it's by such a small amount, and these are my favorite wings, so I use them anyway. With my 2 targets taken care of, it's time to end this. It's time to beat the game. We got one more main boss to defeat, so let's just get it over with. The local cultists started squatting at the dungeon, so I forcibly removed them. Their leader then shows up, stating that squatters do indeed have rights, starting the battle. The lunatic cultist is actually pretty cool, but not a hard fight in the slightest. He tries to use magic and clone himself, but I'm not gonna lie, I don't believe in that mumbo jumbo, so I beat him into the ground. However, upon his death, he brings aliens to Green Hill. On the brighter side though, he did drop the White Emerald, which completes the collection. We're in the final stretch, only the pillars stand in our way. Now everyone knows the pillars suck, so I won't go over them in depth, but I'll give a short description of each of them. Solar Pillar. Super cool looking enemies, but they suck. Vortex Pillar. Actual aliens with guns that do a lot of damage and suck. Nebula Pillar. They look like reject Metroid enemies that suck. Stardust Pillar. The easiest and most exploitable one, but it still sucks.
What? Suck?
Yes, S-U-C-K, suck.
With the pillars taken down, impending doom approaches. But I have one last trick up my sleeve. With the power of all 7 Chaos Emeralds and 10,000 total rings, I transform into Super Sonic and face off with the final boss, the dreaded Moon Lord. Like all other supersonic battles, this is a race against time, as I don't take damage, but my rings are rapidly draining. In his first phase, the Moonlord has 3 eyes, 1 on his head and 2 on his hands. The top eye typically being the favorite to target because of the Moonlord's massive phantasmal death ray. But since that's not an issue for me, I take down his left hand first and then quickly deal with his right, eating all of his attacks simply because I can and there's nothing he can do about it. The Moonlord knows he can't win as long as I'm super, so he stalls as long as he can. He closes his top eye and even keeps it out of bounds and out of my reach when it's open. Realizing this was his strategy, I leave space and bait him back to the ground so he can't hide the eye from me any longer. I power right through the death ray and pluck his top eye right out of his head, unveiling his core and marking the last act of this battle. Ignoring all attempts to defend himself, ruthlessly blitzing his very heart, it was over as soon as it began. The Moonlord has been felled by the hands of Supersonic himself, ending not only the fight, but the entire challenge in my victory. Thank you all so much for watching. This video was actually really fun to make. Combining Terraria and Sonic doesn't seem like it would work, but it worked, trust me. I'm sorry that this video took so long to come out. It was just a lot. First, making the video took a good amount of time, and then I got sick twice while making the video. It was not a good time. Well, making the video was a good time, but the distractions in between were not a good time. We've done Risk of Rain 2 and we've done Terraria, so please let me know if there's any other games you guys want me to throw Sonic into. Assuming there's already mods for it, of course. But if you enjoyed, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload. We're on the road to 2,000 subscribers, guys. Let's hit that ASAP. In 2025, we're off to a late start, but hopefully, with enough persistence from your boy, we can hit 2K this year. Thank you all. I love you all. And I'm out. So yeah, that's all. Bye, guys.